Hello there, Atheist Junior here, your friend and humble narrator, and I'm really excited to be doing a collab with Mr. Anderson, who um, the last video I did was a review of his debate, and um, the response to that video was really great. Thank you guys so much for watching it. I think it's at 10K views right now, which is more than the original debate on SFT and Hovind's channel combined, which I think is pretty funny. And thank you so much to all the people who left nice and supportive comments towards me in that comment section. It really was helpful to read all those comments. So thank you so much, all those people. But yeah, so Mr. Anderson, why don't you just, for anybody who maybe didn't see the last video, who are you and why are you here and what have you done with my son?
I know nothing of this son of which you speak,
Okay.
but my name is Mr. Anderson. I'm a lawyer, and I kind of had my YouTube debut of debating on it. I decided to pick on Dr. Kent Hovind, and we had some fun. And my style is a little bit different from I think what he was used to, and I peppered him with quite a few questions, and it was an interesting debate.
Yeah, it definitely was. I think it was one of the best debates I had seen against Kent because just the way that you set up your argument, formed it and built it up and built towards the sort of final conclusion. It was, to me, it was like cinematic. It was like watching like a great courtroom movie or something, because I don't think we've ever seen somebody of your experience take that sort of cross-examination style and bring it into a debate against Kent. I'm sure like it maybe has been done in other debates, but I'd never seen it done against Kent. And Kent I think has a sore spot against being in courtrooms and talking to lawyers. So it just was, yeah, he was squirming, and it's fun to see Kent squirm during debates. It's probably the most fun thing to watch.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a different skill set, right? I'm not nearly as up on the science as, say, for example, Dr. Dan or Gutsick Gibbon or anybody like that, right? But what I do know how to do and what I can do fairly well is construct a line of questioning where it's gonna be pretty hard for you to try and just completely dodge it, right? Like that's my superpower, right? That's what I can do. So that was sort of what I brought to the table.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And okay, so this person is saying to ask you why you called him doctor during the debate.
I mean, so there's a trade-off, right? On the one hand, like, and I acknowledge right at the start of the debate that there's certainly some controversy over his claim of being a doctor, but my goal in the debate is not really to insult anybody or like disrespect them, and like my style is fairly aggressive in any event. So giving somebody a modicum of respect, um, and just calling them what they want to be called is kind of a smart thing to do, A, and good form, B, and also it sort of lets me hold him to a standard. I mean, he professes to be a PhD in this area, and so in that regard, then if he tries to say, well, I don't know, or I've never studied that, or you'd have to ask an expert. It's like, well, you're the expert, you're the person who's supposed to know, and if you don't know, who does, right? You claim to have 3 PhDs in this subject. So in theory, then you should be the most educated person on this in the world. If you don't know, nobody knows. So.
Yeah, so I showed the entire debate in the last video because I really wanted to make sure and show the complete version of it. But I haven't seen the Q&A yet. So we're going to go through the Q&A and sort of just give some comments on the questions that are asked. And just if you want me to pause the video, just let me know, and I'll pause it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll start off just with real quick statements. These because they were super chats that came in, so I'm guessing they're geared towards Mr. Anderson into making him want to become a believer. Basically, this one came from Bubblegum. Said the self-arrangement of elements by random chance to make functional structures is an atheist miracle. Natural things don't do that; only minds do. And then we find the same type of statement by George Bond. Life is a miracle. Rock soup doesn't result in codes, codons, information, and decision making algorithms. That requires forward thinking, forward planning, and requires a forward planner. Now, I would normally give you guys a chance to respond, but we're running out of time. So the next one is a direct question from Mr. Anderson, and that is, what is your favorite Matrix movie?
Yeah,
So I'm assuming this question is because of the name Mr. Anderson.
Yeah.
But like we said, the only correct answer is the first film.
That's right.
So
correct answer.
Like, try harder with the reference. It would just be my advice, you know. As for the other questions, saying that a mind arranges molecules, it doesn't really make sense to me. And yeah, Bubblegum Gun is just kind of a moron.
Yeah, well, I've seen him, you know, on streams before, and he can be pretty abrasive sometimes. But you know, I kind of took those comments as being a little bit kind of angry at me for kind of challenging somebody that they respect and challenging their worldview. And I can understand. I can understand that sentiment, and I don't really fault them for it.
Yeah, I agree.
First one, that's a classic. Just by way of brief response to the other guys, you know, look, guys. I mean, I'm not trying to dunk on creationism in general. That wasn't, you know, the goal for tonight. My goal is just to provide an example of a kind producing another kind. Whether or not God did that, whether or not that was because of evolution, it's not the purpose of this debate. And Dr. Hovind, if you want to talk about stellar evolution, or you want to talk about the origin of the universe, or any of that stuff, like, let's do it, man. I love that stuff. But we only had an hour and a half, and I mean, look how far we got, right?
If you'd like to respond, go ahead.
Right. I don't think we got anywhere. I still didn't see an example that's supposed to prove of, you know, any. Have you shown me? Have we seen it happen? Imagining your arm dissolving is not seeing this happen in these cells becoming. So your best example that you gave finally after an hour and a half was cancer. You're
well,
saying
and you got your dog example too. But yeah, I mean, the two examples of cancer that are backed up by that scientific research and also backed up by the fact that you agreed that those things would qualify as different kinds. Yeah, those. I mean, I think we did. You know, sir, I look forward to talking to you some more. I think you're a very good debater. I think we can make a lot of great content together. So I mean, I had a lot of fun. I hope you did too.
I had a blast. Yes. So the fact that humans or animals, also living organisms, can produce cancerous cells is enough evidence for you to believe these family trees.
No, sir, it's just enough evidence for me to believe that there are these weird fringe examples of kinds producing and bringing forth other than their kind. I'm not saying that it always happens. I'm not even saying it usually happens. I'm just saying it can happen. And there's, you know, here's one example, you know, and you're right. We had to go through all that presupposition stuff, and that was boring and stuff like that, but it was kind of necessary because it kind of nailed down a bunch of stuff. And then we made some progress, and, you know, we can do this again. I got tons more examples, and we can, you know, focus on the examples next time if you want.
Okay. Would you agree it would take trillions of changes like that to make these family trees true? Until then, these are lines on paper. This is not science.
No, I wouldn't agree that it takes trillions. Trillions is a little bit much. Quadrillion, no. Like,
quintillion.
It's less than that, actually.
Oh.
Like, yeah, and the reason for that, as I understand it,
Okay. All it would take is a single cell organism dividing. Then you're multicellular. So that's not trillions of changes. I mean,
right. Well, I mean, you know, it's not trillions of changes. And I think actually, if you let the recording play, what I say is something to the effect of, look, there's a lot of like the genome, the protein coding portions of the genome are relatively small, and those are the ones that typically are going to express phenotype. The other stuff's regulatory and structural and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't matter that much if those things change, and so you don't need trillions of changes. But one of the other things I think really is interesting here is that he keeps on going like, this is just lines on paper, and it's like, I mean, yeah, everything is lines on paper. Like the Bible is written using lines on paper, right?
Yeah.
The separation between kinds is lines on paper. We're all drawing lines on paper. The question is, where are those lines, and what ideas do those lines represent, and how valuable are those ideas? Like, and that's the debate. So like saying, well, this person's ideas are just ideas is kind of like, I mean, yeah, I guess that's true. You don't seem to have a point, but I mean, you're not saying anything false, so okay.
Yeah, and before I play it, I wanted to read a super chat from Nancy Millstone for $1.99. It says, "Excited for your analysis, AJ. Thanks." Well, thank you for the super chat, and yeah.
This is a little bit off topic, but you asked the question. Is that like there are parts of the genome that code for proteins and that are really important for determining like morphological differences, and then there are parts of the genome that aren't as important. Like it's not that they don't do anything, right? It's just that they don't do as much, right? So a lot of these morphological changes are driven by mutations in those more important parts of the genome, and then a lot of these like less important ones, those happen too, but they're not as critical, if that makes any sense.
Okay, you mentioned them turning off functions. Are there any that add new novel information, or is all these mutations downhill, negative, away from the goal?
That's like a super interesting question, and it's not one that I'm going to be able to answer. And kind of, we could do that if you like. We'll talk about. I mean, we'll talk about whether or not you want to do more examples of weird and wacky examples of changes of kind. Because, like I said, I got more. We can do that, or we could do this other question another time. I mean, I'm open.
Right. Would you agree that an amoeba does not have the gene code?
Yeah, this is, I mean, something that that Dr. Hovind does fairly consistently is he throws these little things out like he's trying to bait you off topic, right? And get you into something that you don't have time to discuss. And he's really good at it because he's really good at saying super like interesting wrong things. Right?
Yeah.
The thing that you said is wrong, but there's actually a really good response to it. And I know a bunch about, the right thing. I can explain why it's wrong. And so then you're like, okay, well, let me jump on that. And then you'll be halfway through that and he'll throw out another one and you'll, and you just end up chasing your tail. Right. And, one of the only ways to make progress with, somebody who's good at doing that is to just not bite. Right. And like, the information questions, it is interesting, right? Because like, I mean, the problem with this notion that nothing adds new information is that every example that scientists will come up with of changes that that show increases in fitness or that show the development of a new morphological trait or a new function or anything like that, they'll say, well, that doesn't count because it's a duplication, or that doesn't count because it's a frame shift, or that doesn't count because it's a point mutation, or that doesn't count because it's, a deletion, or it's a, and they'll be like, and all those things are actually losses of information. And it's like, but those are all of the ways that we think that, that we think that organisms change. So nothing then is a gain of information. Even the things that result in gains of information are not gains of information. So maybe gaining information doesn't exist. Maybe you don't need it, to evolve.
Well,
maybe it's something they made up.
the last time I debated Kent, when he asked me about information, my response was just, well, what do you mean by information? And he really couldn't answer that question.
Yeah.
So I have not seen this debate between David and Dr. Dino. At the end, Raw Matt made a domestic violence joke, and the show ended. It immediately went private. So did somebody record that? I would like to see this, but I am first time hearing of this, so that doesn't surprise me. Raw Matt, I think he was a former breatharian.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah.
And he also, I think he forged a scientific paper.
Conduct, yeah.
Yeah, that was classy.
Code to make an arm, and it would take lots of genes to make the genetic information to build an arm that functions, 2 of them, and the nervous system and the blood system to supply them, and the balance system to keep them going. There's a lot more to just an arm than the cells to make that arm, the bones, the muscles.
No, there's really not, because I mean the cells are what make up the blood, and the bone, and the skin and the tissue. It's all cells. So,
well, I mean, there is and there isn't, right? Like, if you really get into like this evo devo stuff, which I'm not an expert in, right? But there's this whole field of genetics where they talk about like, in terms of structural changes, like it does require a bunch of like little changes to the genome, and it's not just one, right? But most of those changes are like changes in gene expression, where it's like there'll be a structure and it'll be like pinch in, grow out, like radiate, close off, right? And when you add all those things together, you end up with the structure. And so people, like biologists, are really, really good at explaining to people like exactly how something evolved, through a series of small changes, all of which are in and of themselves beneficial. So like, suggesting that that's not possible is like running into a brick wall.
Issues. And there'd be a lot of stuff that have to be added to an amoeba. And you're thinking random chance over billions of years is able to do that.
Well, I mean, I think when you say stuff like that, you're kind of being a little bit unfair to amoebas. Like, they're super interesting. They're very complicated, and they've got bigger genomes than we do, right?
Yeah,
so like,
they're smart enough to become a whale if you give them a whale. I know.
Well, I mean, I don't think that amoebas I mean, we've kind of been using amoeba as like a shorthand for like single cell organism, but if you're talking about like amoeba, like amoebas didn't, nobody thinks amoebas became whales, right? But like, I thought you were talking about like amoebas, right? The actual thing, like they're cool. Super different. Like, I mean, they're way different. They've been evolving like in a different direction than us for like a really long time. So like they're super different, right?
Oh, they are amazing. And many single-cell creatures have a little hair at the back, the flagella, that's attached to a motor that turns 100,000 RPM. And 8 million of those motors would fit on the stump of a human hair. Pluck a hair, cut it off, 8 million motors. And all 8 million of those motors happened by chance and came from a dot of nothing exploding.
I don't know if they happen by chance, but it is
I'm on your
super
side now.
interesting. It is super interesting that there's that many motors in there.
I'm on your side.
Buddy, I love it. Let's be on the same team. That's what I was trying to say. Like, we just got to ask each other questions, right?
All 3 of us can work together.
Come visit me in SpongeBob Land, right? Come visit. It's nice here. We got eggs. I don't know. We got
okay.
I don't know. We got stuff.
All right,
next
gentlemen.
question.
I don't know why I
got
said
it, Matt.
that.
Actually, I'll say, Matt, before I hand it to you, a lot of people in the audience asking about the next open mic. For round 2 between Mr. Anderson and Kent, we'll definitely incorporate an open mic. So hopefully sooner than later. Okay, Matt, feel free to ask the next question.
All right. Mr. Anderson, if you can explain the differences between species and what we creationists define as a kind.
No, I can't. Like Dr. Hovind said, like there's like 26 different definitions of species, at least. I mean, like species. The problem is that life, like reality, is kind of messy, right? And so, trying to define species it's like drawing that line on the color gradient. And you ask a different scientist, they'll draw a different line. It's like if you want 3 opinions, ask 2 scientists. You know?
Good one. Kent, would you like to
I
help
like-
answer for him?
I like that answer. That's good. Ask if you want 3 opinions, ask 2 scientists. Probably if you want 10 opinions, ask 1 lawyer. Okay.
Yeah, the joke's usually originally for lawyers, but
Okay. You're right. The word species and kind are used interchangeably. This is all man drawing lines to decide which one goes in which box. Okay. The animals.
See, this is an argument that Grayson, I don't know if you're familiar with his channel, he's done a bunch of debates against Kent. I think that he points out that I really like is that Kent tries to have it both ways, where he says that dividing up animals into different groups is totally arbitrary, which it is, but at the same time, he wants to say that there are these rigid boundaries where a kind can never give birth or never produce something of another kind, even though he says it's arbitrary. And I really like that argument.
Yeah, well, he really likes to say the species is arbitrary, but kind is natural and fluid and stuff, right? But then he equates the two, and so he gets into trouble. But like, just jumping back to that sort of concept that, like, there's a bunch of different definitions of species, and like that's true, right? And that there's a good reason for that, and that, like, originally species just meant like it's what they call the biological definition of species, where, like, if you can interbreed, then you're the same species. If you can't, then you're not, right? And then that became problematic because we started discovering, examples of animals that are really very different and clearly haven't been related for a long time and have morphological traits that are widely separated that could interbreed. And so it was like, okay, that doesn't work that well. And they're like, well, maybe we should just like define them based on like their morphological differences. And so, we'll find things that have, if they've got really big morphological differences, then they'll be the same species. And if they have very similar morphologies, then they'll be the same species. And then what we found was that there were species that had almost identical morphologies that couldn't interbreed, right? And so it's like, well, that doesn't work either. And then you run into the problem of, okay, well, how do you classify and separate organisms that don't breed with each other, that aren't sexual, that reproduce asexually? Well, you can't use the interbreeding model because none of them interbreed, and then what are you going to do when you run across a fossil, right? Fossils are made of rock, right? They have, there's some of them sometimes that have a little bit of organic material, but it's like super degraded, A, and B, a lot of them have no organic material. So all you can look at is morphology. So even if it could interbreed, you don't know whether it interbred with anything. So you have to use, again, another different classification system. And so, like, each one of those things got called species, right? And so you end up with a bunch of these different definitions, and each one is useful in a different context, right? And he likes to try and play on that. But I mean, ultimately, it's like, pick any portion of any one of those definitions and apply it to kind, and it can get you, right? Use them all. I don't care. They all have blurs.
Yeah, I think that this question is flawed in a way because the advantage that species has over the term kind is that you have the Linnaean classification system where you have these other categories of genus and family, order, class. But with kind, you only have kind. So that's why, of course, you see creationists like Kent slide the term kind to mean whatever they need it to mean during that argument. Like, if it needs to be a
and that's
family,
one of the
or
reasons I spent so much time nailing him down on what a kind is. And actually, right now, he's going to just nail some more coffin shut. And if you think I'm going to let him, wiggle away from the further specificity that he gives to the definition of kind, then you're dreaming, right? This is what you say kind means. It's what it means.
Yeah.
Kind is. Here's Webster's dictionary: species, a kind or a sort. Synonyms for species. Synonyms.
Don't use the dictionary. We're above that. You've got a doctorate. I'm a nerd. Let's not use the dictionary. That's
so dictionaries don't count.
Well, not for this context.
Where would you like me to find?
Use a real definition? Because
okay, let's take the ultimate source, the Bible. They can bring forth after their kind. Now, I just trumped the whole argument. I brought the ultimate irrefutable source way beyond a dictionary. God said they can only bring forth after their kind. I win. Good night.
Well, exact answer.
Okay. Which version of the Bible are you using?
I mean, that's another good point, right? I know why. I don't know. I know he says that the King James version is like the authoritative version, but like,
Okay, the old King James version or the new King James version?
I mean, I don't know. It should be the Hebrew anyway, but whatever.
No, it was written in English first and translated into Hebrew. That's what Kent thinks.
I think Hebrew predates English, but I think it might have been written in Greek before it was written in much else. So
he makes this argument that basically boils down to that somehow the Greek or the other languages are informed by the English version. I don't know how that makes sense, but it's just because he doesn't want to admit that the original version wasn't written in English, because he has a very like American white person centric view of his religion. And I think it makes him uncomfortable, the idea that Jesus was probably like a Middle Eastern guy, which I mean he would have had to been, probably did not have white skin and blue eyes,
but not Republican Jesus has got an AR-15, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And he didn't ride a dinosaur. He didn't ride a T-Rex.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, I guess we'll go to, actually, what we'll do is this one here, because it's a super chat. Matt, if you want to read this one to Kent.
Sure. Kent mentions the inability to make vitamin C. Why is it all great apes also make or can't make vitamin C? Why do we all have the same broken gene caused by the same mutation?
I'm not sure it's caused by a mutation. I don't know.
Really quickly, I just want to say that shout out to Mr. Archaeopteryx. I don't know why you're giving SFT $15. That seems like a lot, but I would say this is a good question, but leave out the second part of the question, because when you ask Kent a question where you make statements that are you're claiming are factual, he's usually going to dodge the question by focusing on that part and just saying, well, you say it's caused by a mutation, but I don't think that it is, instead of actually answering the first question. So I would say that if you're going to ask Kent a question, like, usually just make it one and try not to do what he did in the second part of the question, I guess.
That's a good point, and it's really tough to do in writing, though. In Mr. Archaeopteryx's defense, but that having been said, like, especially if you have the privilege of doing it verbally, like, this is just sort of a technique, sort of a tip, is that you got to do what I call slicing the onion very thin, right? So when you're asking somebody a set of questions, you make sure that it is very much one fact, one question, and never more than that. And you try and make those facts as like specific and particular as possible, so that it's really difficult for them to try and dodge it and like deliberately misunderstand it and stuff like that. Because it's like, then if they try, then you can kind of make fun of them a little bit by being like, like, this is a really, really simple question, right? It's not a trick question here, like, I mean, I don't know, in a contract, right? It's like, this is the contract that you saw is like too complicated of a question, because it's like, is it not? I don't know. I haven't looked at every page. But if you just be like, this is your signature on this page here, right? Well, I mean, I don't know. You don't know? Do you know what your own signature looks like? Yeah. All right. And does this look like your signature? Yeah. Do you remember making these marks on a piece of paper on that day? Yeah. And that piece of paper, did it look pretty much like this one? Yeah. And when you made those marks and you looked at the picture, or the marks that you made afterwards, did they look pretty much like this? Yeah. So you haven't got any reason to believe that this is not, in fact, the signature that you made on that day. No, I don't know, blah, 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 right? Okay, well, sitting here today, you can't think of any reason, right? No, I can't think of any reason, right? So, like, you see how it's even though this is the contract you signed, sounds like the same question as all those other little questions that I asked, he can dodge that first question a lot more easily than he can dodge that second series of questions. Right.
Yeah.
And then you can go back through and be like, all right. And when you looked at the contract, you read it and you remember what it says. And the second page said this and the third page said this. And I really want to get to the fourth page, which is this one here, blah, blah, blah. Right.
Yeah, I think that's why I like your style of asking questions so much, is because I'm always encouraging people to do that. And so, yeah. All right. I want to see what he said.
Could assume that. And if the diet, I think God was amazing. He designed a world that not only has living creatures, but the food that they need to live. And he told Adam and Eve, eat the fruit, vegetables, and seeds. And if we would simply do that, it would provide most of the minerals we need and probably wouldn't have any diseases. So I think most of the disease, back on vitamin C. We know the sailors died in the British Navy from scurvy because of lack of vitamin C. And they finally started bringing limes on board. They called them the limeys because of that. So do we all have the same broken gene? I don't know. Are great apes, do they die of scurvy? I don't know.
If they don't eat vitamin C, yeah, they do.
Oh, how do they get vitamin? Is there something in that ape that
they get it through their diet?
Yeah. So the desire, sometimes you have a hunger, like I want to eat an avocado or something. You don't know why, but maybe that's got a vitamin you need. Where did that drive to get those vitamins come from? Is that designed? I mean, when my car can't get enough gasoline, it starts sucking in air and starts gurgling and calling, lights come on, like, give me gas, Where's the light coming on that tells your body, I need vitamin C? How does the ape know? You see all of our animals around here at our petting zoo, they select what they want. When I offer a hot dog to the squirrel, he's not interested. I offer the hot dog to my dog, wow, I'll take it. When I offer a peanut to the dog, he don't want it. They all seem to know what they need. I think that's pretty cool.
So the answer to how your body tells you that you need vitamin C is your gums start bleeding and you get anemia.
I don't know. I kind of got like, when he started going off like that, it reminded me of Grandpa Simpson when he was like, the point is I had an onion on my belt, which was the style at the time. And I don't know why it matters whether or not your dog likes peanuts or not. I mean,
old Hovind yells at Cloud. Yeah, he completely dodged this question, but it's like I was telling you, he talks about, God said to eat the fruits, vegetables, and seeds. What he's getting at here is the apricot seeds as a cancer treatment, but I don't think he knows, I guess, not to directly mention that, because his son Eric Hovind actually got smacked by the FDA for selling apricot seeds on his website and claiming that they were a cure for cancer. And he had to change the language on the site to not make a direct claim like that, because the FDA is like not going to allow you to do that.
Yeah. For anybody watching, if you have cancer, what you should probably do is talk to your doctor, and whatever they, recommend in the conventional medicines, probably your best bet. Chemotherapy works a lot better than apricots.
Yeah. Don't take apricot seeds, because then you'll just, instead of dying, you'll get cyanide poisoning and then die. But
which is not better.
Yeah. You might have a chance with the chemo.
Yeah.
All right. Matthew, unless you wanted a quick thought, we can move to the next question. Up to you, gentlemen. Okay. Let's go with, there you go, Matt. Go with echoing erudite.
All right. For Mr. Anderson, during the debate, you mentioned cells evolving to getting a backbone. Can you show the observable evidence for this happening without just inferring and asserting it?
No. Next question. No, I'm not going to be that dismissive. So this kind of comes back to this whole concept of like, what is science, right? And one of the things that Dr. Hovind likes to say is that science is just what we can see and observe, and that's not science. That's looking, right? Science requires a little more than that. Science requires a degree of imagination and inference, and it's that imagination and the inference that allows us to take the evidence of the things that we see and figure out larger processes of things that we can't necessarily see, and then we can get a lot more out of and understand the natural world a lot better and make predictions because of that logic and that using of evidence to create inferences and use our imaginations.
Kent, would you like to answer that?
Well, science is knowledge gained from observation, experiments to describe the world around us. I agree. I'm in favor of imagination. I had a wonderful time tonight imagining your arm dissolving.
Oh, Kent!
I don't want it to happen. Well, you brought it up. I thought, wow, what would happen?
Yeah, that was weird. Weird thing
Yeah,
to say.
I don't know why he felt the need to fire a shot across my bow there, but I mean, I think you just take it in stride in a situation like that, So,
Yeah. And thank you to Colossia789 for the $5 super chat. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Okay, let's keep going. But also, this is just kind of a malformed question because they're saying cells evolving to getting a backbone. Like, are you talking about individual cells getting backbones, or by cells, plural, do you mean a multicellular organism and eventually getting a backbone, as in a population getting a backbone? Like, I don't really understand the question.
Yeah, I mean, they're asking us to show observable evidence of the evolution of vertebrae, from an organism that doesn't have vertebrae, and it's like that happened a really long time ago, and there's no animals that are that are growing new structures that resemble vertebrate today. So it's kind of it's designed to be a gotcha question, and I mean, the real answer is like I said, we know those things happened not because of direct observations of that specific thing, but because of indirect observations and inferences that build on that. And those still count as observations, and using them to figure out the world around you still counts as science. And so, saying that you're not allowed to use your brain, you're not allowed to use inference, doesn't really make sense. And in a second, you'll see, I'll give an example to try and illustrate why I think that is, which I kind of like.
So I think that there may be some evidence in the fossil record of bone structures that are partially calcified, but not fully bone. But the thing is that I don't think cartilage will fossilize. So this is again.
I mean, not to discount the fossil record, right? Like the fossil record is going to show progression over time of different animals that have more and more sophisticated structures that resemble vertebrae more and more. But then I mean, you still have to use a degree of inference and say that they're representative of a population, and that those various populations are related to one another, and that the changes that we see in the fossil record represent a change in allele frequency within a population over time. And if you use those inferences, which are all super reasonable inferences to make, then it follows quite logically that these different examples from the fossil record represent the development of a backbone. And that's evidence, that's science for sure.
But I didn't think you were going to enjoy it.
I didn't say, well,
it was a thought experiment.
I like using my imagination. Okay. Things that we see cows produce cows, dogs produce dogs. We see that. Millions of people have seen it. They've observed it. That's all we've ever seen. Now, anything beyond that is imagination. And since the word science comes from the Latin word "seer," knowledge, what do we know? We know dogs produce dogs. That we know. We do not know dogs came from an amoeba. That we don't know. So that's outside the field of science. Just like you're wanting to get something outside the kind, I think your evolution religion is outside the field of science. And you can have it if you want. And you, obviously you do, but it shouldn't be part of science. Science, Latin word seer, scientia. What do we know? Evolution is not science, it's a religion. And you're welcome to it. Knowledge gained through study or practice. Okay, you go practice all the dogs you want, all the cows you want. Get it to turn into something different. It won't happen.
Well, okay. Do you guys mind if I go off on a little rant here, or do we need to move on?
Yeah, you can have the last word. It was a question for you, so feel free. Go ahead.
Okay. I'll give you an example. Let's say we watch a video from 40 years ago of a man with a bowl of soup, right? And you see the pursed lips and you see the ripples appear on the surface of the soup. So if you were to watch the man do that and all you were allowed to do was observe, then all you could say is that when he pursed his lips over the soup, there ripples appeared on in the soup. And that's not very useful. And it's not science because it's just describing what you see. Science requires that addition of a little imagination. You can't see the air coming out of the man's lungs and hitting the surface of the water. So you have to take the things that you can see, like the shape of his lips and the ripples and your knowledge of the past and your own experiences in terms of what those things are usually paired with, and imagine that it means that when you see lips shaped like that and ripples across the top of that bowl of soup like that, that means that man was likely blowing on the surface of the soup long ago and far away, and even though you weren't there. Now you have inferred using your observations and your imagination. Is that science? Yeah, I think so. You have a theory that allows you to make a useful prediction, like that the air is coming out of the man's lungs and moving over the soup, and that cools it. And going even further, you might even imagine, based on all these things, that the soup was hot. And that's kind of cool.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anderson. There you go, Matt.
Oh, you're muted.
I feel like there's a term for this that I can't really think of. I don't know if it's recognition or like meta memory, but just recognizing something based on your previous knowledge or your previous experience of that thing. Like you said, with the recognizing what someone is doing when they're blowing on the soup. Yeah, it was an interesting answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like it. That is how, you know, that's how we figure stuff out, right? And so, you know, you couldn't see the soup, right? You had to imagine the air, or you couldn't see the air. You had to imagine the air. But you know that usually that's what happens, right? That you can do an experiment today, and you can see that when I go, I typically purse my lips, and you can see that when I go, the soup ripples, right? And so, like, in a soup, it's sort of more intuitive, right? But like essentially the same thought process goes, you know, when we think like, okay, let's think about fossils, right? And you know, usually when a group of animals slowly change over time, some of them are going to die and be fossilized, and you know, representatives of that group that die are going to typically have the alleles that represent that group. And so if we were to follow that group over time and look at individuals that sample, you know, that sample from that group over time, we would see how that group was changing. That's true now. So let's assume based on that that's what's happening in the past, and then that allows us to come to a conclusion, right? So the only thing we're really changing here is what is the invisible mechanism? Is it evolution or is it the invisible mechanism of air, right?
Right. So I'm going to read a few comments. So thank you to Mimer3113 for the 200 Swedish kronar. And was Jesus a Christian? I don't know. I'd have to Google that.
I think the answer is technically he wasn't, because a Christian is a follower of Jesus. So
yeah,
he wasn't a Christian. Jesus was a Jew.
Yeah, Jesus was a Jew. So Deviant Outcast says that cartilage can absolutely fossilize. The reason we usually don't see it is due to decay rate, i.e. how quickly cartilage decomposes compared to bone and teeth, which takes much longer. So that is very interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think that's dead on. Yeah, because we can even see that makes sense, because we can even see like some other structures and stuff like that fossilize, like, you know, we've seen like feathers and feather imprints, and we've seen like pigments from feathers, so we know what color they are and stuff like that. So like, yeah, it's probably just much rarer and more difficult to find because they don't fossilize well. Yeah.
Yes, and when the boy who drowned at Dinosaur Adventureland was in the emergency room, Kent Hovind was handing out brochures to DAL. This is true, and it's a little bit disturbing. But we're going to move on.
Okay. Do I get to answer that?
Oh,
that finally is a good illustration. We don't know what gravity is. We can observe what it does. We can observe the air hitting the soup, making the ripples. Actually, we can see air molecules under a good microscope, see the oxygen and nitrogen and et cetera, carbon dioxide. But
I don't think that's true.
we have to imagine that he's indeed blowing on the soup. This is where you can extend observable science within limits. But you guys want to take observable science of dogs producing a variety of dogs, big ones, little ones, and come to the conclusion that dogs are related to butterflies. That's way outside the field of common sense, science even. Takes a real, you'd have to be smoking something to believe that.
Well, I mean, I don't really think it's that different, Dr. Hovind,
Well, no, you
for
don't.
you to ridicule that, than it is for you to say that that this inference with respect to soup is predicated on this belief in this invisible idea of air that nobody has ever directly observed, and that we can't even prove that there was air in the room when the video was taken long ago and far away. I mean, would it be fair for us to call our theory about the existence of air a religion?
Well, no, that analogy at some point would break down, like all analogies do. I think that's a reasonable conclusion. The guy's blowing on the soup. Of course, there could have been an earthquake at the same time and shaking the soup, and he's going, "Ooh, earthquake!" And we might come to the wrong conclusion, But I'll go with the earthquake. I think it was an earthquake, and he was going.
Oh, I think maybe the ripples were made by supernatural forces, and you know what? You cannot disprove that the ripples. That he wasn't just pursing his lips, and that God wasn't making the ripples in the soup. I mean,
Yeah,
based on the logic that I often see from you, those two explanations are equally likely.
I didn't say that.
So I have to say, we absolutely can see air patterns, and you would use Schlieren imaging. You wouldn't use a microscope to look at air.
Yeah, that's a good point. He sounded like he was saying that you can see individual atoms under a powerful enough microscope, and I'm like, I don't think that you can do that. I think that no, you can't see individual atoms under a good microscope.
Yeah, because I believe the most powerful microscopes, or some of the most powerful ones we have, are electron microscopes.
Yeah.
And it uses electrons to image what you're looking at. So
yeah, it's real small, but it's not atoms. Although I think that they recently made they trapped a bunch of an atom in a laser, and you can actually see the atom with the naked eye.
I did see that. That's pretty awesome.
That's cool, but it's not this.
You know what I was thinking about the other day that was kind of like mind-blowing is that just to think about the fact that we're actually all made out of molecules. Like, I don't know, it was just kind of like, it's crazy to think about. Like, I know it's wrong, but I sort of imagine molecules as being like tiny little vibrating spheres. And I know that's not actually accurate, but that's the only way I can imagine it. And to think that every living organism is just a bunch of smaller little individual cells, and then those cells are made up of even smaller molecules which have quarks in them. It's I don't know.
Yeah, and you know what the craziest thing is that most of those atoms are actually empty space.
That's true.
Right, and you're not actually really touching anything. I think there's some cool videos about that. But
I have seen some videos about that. All right, let's keep going.
Equally likely, I said we could sit here all night and make up fairy tales. Somebody in the other room was blowing through a long straw, and he was just trying to fool everybody. Oh yeah, why are we doing this?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Waste of time.
Why do we do this? Why do we do this, Dr. Hovind? Why do we torture ourselves like this?
I do it because I am concerned about your soul. I think you're more than just a collection of cells. I think you have a body, a soul, and a spirit. And I think God designed all of us, and I think we've all sinned and broken his laws, and I want to see you go to heaven. And I think you were taught a dumb theory, and you believed it. I think the Hamas people were taught something stupid, and they believed it, and they act on it. They think the Jews are inferior.
I'm not affiliated with Hamas, sir.
No.
But I do appreciate your concern for my soul. That's very touching.
But you were taught evolution, and you believed it. I'm sorry for that. I would like to help. I'd like to undo the damage that some teacher did to you.
I appreciate your help. I look
Keep
forward.
watching. Keep
I look
watching my
forward to some
videos.
more.
Hey,
I look forward to more help.
I'll send you one to Canada, wherever you are. Okay.
Wow.
Watch them.
I think I've seen a lot of your videos already.
And it didn't work yet. Watch them again.
I'm very stubborn.
Okay.
You guys are going to be best friends in no time. So what we'll
I
do,
think that might be true. I think that might be true.
gentlemen, let's wrap it up with. I know you have another appointment tonight, Ken. So let's wrap it up with one more question. As 2 hours has really flown by. This has been fun. The audience has had a good time, and I'm sure people are already anticipating a round two. Mr. Anderson and Kent. Okay, Matt, here's the next question for you, brother.
All right, Kent, this one is for you for starting. What is a kind, and how do you determine what organisms belong to the same kind, and how different do those organisms must become before you or they are considered to be a different kind?
This has been a puzzle for science for thousands of years. How do we classify them? And I'll go back to what I've said hundreds of times. The animals do not care how we classify them. We have on our North 40 a bunch of cows and sheep and horses and donkeys all mixed together. They wander around freely together. I feed them all at the same time out of the same trough. We pet them all. The kids have a blast. And the cows show no interest in the sheep in mating with them. The cows, they know what their kind is, so they're smarter than most evolutionists. So they think they know their kind. That is kind, a sort. The Bible says if they can bring forth, they're the same kind. But just like scientists have always had a very difficult time declaring exactly what is the definition of species, I'll show you here, right here. To this day, Scientific American, to this day, scientists struggle with that question. What is a species? The debate over species is far from over. I think I suppose the same is true of kind, but see, I'm not asking for mine to be paid for as by taxpayers and put in the public schools.
Yeah, you are, Kent. Yes, you are.
The evolutionists are demanding that their religion of all these animals coming from an amoeba is science, and we all should pay to have that be taught. So I don't have to prove the definition of kind. God said if they can bring forth, they're the same kind. I think that's generally really observable and intuitive to a 5-year-old. Most people can tell. Ask a 5-year-old, is this bird the same as this cow? Oh, no, they're a different kind. So generally it's intuitive, but again, species is not defined. 26 definitions of species. What is it? Most of them will say, well, a good synonym for a species is right here. I'll show you. Synonym for species, kind. What is a species? It's a kind or sort. And you can get science textbooks or dictionaries or whatever you trust and say, they're all going to say that. I don't think anybody knows for sure where the border is in every case, but it doesn't matter. The fact that we can't define the border between orange and reddish orange doesn't mean that black is white. Go ahead.
Well, I think that Dr. Hoban's absolutely.
I actually kind of like that last part of what he said. That was pretty clever. Or as a creationist, I think that was actually kind of a good answer. Thing about colors.
Yeah, like that sort of harkens back to our whole analogy about like the color gradient between red and orange. I think the problem with that analogy is that, we're not talking about black and white. We're talking about, so like, I mean, if you can't, perfectly determine where the line is between red and orange, like that's okay, right? But I mean, if I show you something that goes from clearly red to clearly orange, you're kind of stuck, right? So the fact that you agree that there's a border at all, even if it's a fuzzy border, it's problematic, right?
Yeah, because he's like, show me where it changes from red to orange, and you're like, well, you can't because it's too vague. And then you tell him, okay, on one side we have this species in the red column, and then over here we have in the orange column a different species, and he says, well, that's too long of a time period between those two, so that's not science because they're too different. So it's like, well, there's no right answer then.
No, well, there never will be unless you use a more precise definition, like like he's given here, where, well, here, play my answer, you'll see what I mean.
Absolutely right. Even in this very debate, we've really kind of nailed down what a kind is, and generally, what we would say is morphological differences and an inability to interbreed. But if you're unsure, then you know what? Take the two animals, put them in a pen together, and they bring forth, then they're probably the same kind. So if you take a wolf and a chihuahua and you put them in the same pen together, the wolf's going to mate with the wolf, and the chihuahua's going to mate with the chihuahua, and the only thing the wolf's going to do to the chihuahua is eat it. So
Right.
they're different kinds. Right?
Oh, because it eats it? No.
Well, no, because they don't mate.
Okay.
And they're
They
super
probably-
different
no,
in size.
They probably could. Might be physical limitations, but genetically, I think the number of chromosomes. There have been examples of dogs and wolves mating, and
But
dogs and
never
coyotes
chihuahuas
mating.
and wolves. Never
Well,
chihuahuas and
Chihuahua's
wolves.
barely a dog, but yeah, it's still in the dog.
Exactly. It's barely a dog. It's a different kind than a wolf, even though they share a common
There's a
ancestor.
dog coyote hybrid. Let's see, I've got
That's
samples
another
of all.
good.
It's like, Kent, are you arguing for or against evolution?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think he really stepped in on that one.
Yeah, that was pretty. That was very good.
Yeah,
I like
it's
that.
It's another. Yeah, I enjoyed that one too. I mean, that's like I was watching one of your debates the other day, and you had this really good example about like above ground mosquitoes and like mosquitoes from the London tunnels, and Dr. Hoven was like, well, they're still just mosquitoes, and I was like just like screaming at my computer, going like, what you like, say they're not the same kind of mosquito, right? And then say like, or better yet would have been to say, well, they're still mosquitoes, and then you go, the mosquito doesn't care what you call it. Take the mosquitoes, put them in a little pen together, and and the mosquitoes will know their kind, even if you don't, right? And the male mosquito, the underground mosquito will mate with the underground mosquito, and the above ground mosquito will mate with the above ground mosquito. And what that tells you quite clearly is that they are different kinds. It doesn't matter whether you still call it a mosquito. The mosquitoes don't care.
Yeah, that would have been good.
Yeah, it's one of those things, right? But you probably get another chance. Yeah. So next time he says they're still dogs or they're still whatever, he'll say, well, you know what? Take the two of them, put them in a pen, right? They'll know their kind even if you don't.
I mean, we're full. We're knocking them out tonight.
Hey, remember, I'm on your side now.
No, we're on the same side.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it's already been about an hour has gone by, which is surprising. But I think that's pretty much the end of the Q&A there.
It is.
And I just want to say thank you so much, Mr. Anderson, for coming on and doing this collaboration with me. It was a lot of fun. I'm glad that I got the chance to sort of talk with you personally on our other offline stream we did the other day. That was really fun too. And I feel like I learned a lot just from talking to you. You're a smart cookie.
Kinder than I deserve. Thank you.
Well, if you would like to come on again, I'd be happy to have you on. Like, I've done debate reviews with Horazio and Grayson and Mark Reed, and it's always fun. So yeah, we'll plan something another day. But so you're not on YouTube. Do you have anything that you'd like to plug before we sort of sign off?
Yeah, my next debate with Dr. Hovind is November 2nd on SFB's channel. So, come one, come all, and give me the support that I need. I'll be, going right into the lion's den and petting the lion, right? So,
yeah, and I plan on doing either a debate after show for that, but if I don't do that, then I'll definitely be doing a debate review.
Sure.
But we'll figure that out. But yeah, definitely check out that debate. I'll definitely be watching that when it's live. I look forward to it. But yeah, thank you to all the people in the side chat and all the people who sent super chats. And yeah, we're gonna sign off. So I'll just see you guys in the next video.
Bye, guys.